Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek, Episode 11. The End is the Beginning, or The Android Who Knew Too Much.
The familiar smell of harvest time. Wood smoke, mown hay, and that heavy sweetness of the grapes.
Then you won't miss it. Any of it. One bit.
Oh, yes, my dear. I will miss you, and Zhaban, and number one. I tried my best to belong to this place. But I don't think I ever truly felt at home here.
I suppose you always had one eye on the stars.
Raffi does the banana phone song.
Does he? Number
Raffi doesn't
one,
do any number one shit on
set
stun.
all your phasers on stun. That's Raffi. For those who don't know, I already said this joke, but it wasn't recording. So
Raffi is a French Canadian.
Full disclosure, I'm like trying really hard to get this joke recorded. It was that good.
And you're doing that joke for free because we did not get a single fucking
shit.
review
No,
from last year.
Fuck you guys.
At least not that I could find.
Fuck you guys.
I mean, there's so many.
Just kidding.
There's
Just
so
kidding.
many places to get podcasts these days, but on iTunes anyway. And of course, on iTunes you have to click every country. Or
I think you have to really be into podcasts in order to like be like, yeah, I'm going to listen to that.
and then
You
write
can-
a review.
You
about
can
it.
be really into Star Trek, but not, and just listen to like a different Star Trek podcast. But you got to really be in like, I'm going to listen to like 5 Star Trek podcasts.
Well, it's just getting people to review stuff, and then on a specific platform, I think is pretty.
And then you're
Yeah.
bribing them basically.
And and the reward is like, well, it's not like a gift certificate.
There is no reward.
It's like a joke.
The reward will be
And I've heard these jokes before.
A joke and more exposure, which means that you'll be able to download it more easily.
Wait, more exposure for us or for the person who writes the review?
No, it's the download. It makes the download more available. It means it's not ever going to be on back order. It's not going to run out.
And that's what makes time travel possible.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Flux capacitation.
okay. What's this episode? This is
This week on the Jean-Luc Picard mysteries.
Yes, it is the Dixon Hill mysteries. What is this? Episode 11 of the podcast, but episode 3 of Star Trek Picard, called "The End Is the Beginning."
Did another cool opening with cool war shots that makes the show come alive. I don't know, gives it gives it a different vibe, I guess.
You see that whole Mars stuff go down again, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
that's some fucked up shit.
Yeah, it's really cinematic. Like,
Yeah.
I guess that's a lot of TV now, though, right? It's also cinematic.
Yeah, production value is good nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be overdone, and sometimes. But I liked the beginning. I thought it was
Yeah, I liked it too.
Yeah.
it was an interesting cold open because you have the recap, but then the Mars thing was to remind you about that. But
Right.
But some of that was already in the recap, but I think that little part with all the explosions was to get you in the mindset of like why, because obviously Picard and Raffi are
It's
at
like right after that.
yeah, and they're like at Star. They want you to understand the mindset that Picard and that the Starfleet and the Federation are thinking.
Right. And then I guess they had to tie it together by having a shot of the android like shooting himself in itself.
And then you see how Raffi's like suspicious already of some stuff happening.
Yeah.
With the secret Romulans.
And an interesting
Oh, that's after the Mars recap, though.
That's when
but
they're
it's all
talking
like
in that-
feeds
in
into
that
it.
Scene.
Right, yeah. It was 14. That was 2385, which was 14 years ago.
You're just saying numbers.
I am. Yeah, I like numbers.
2385.
25713.
Yeah, 2385.
892.
Because the bulk of Picard is taking place in
like
2399.
99.
Yeah, and so the previous the Mars attacks one was 2384.
Or
I
20,
guess.
no, 2385.
I think it was also 85.
Oh, the time between the Mars attacks and Jean-Luc and JL and
It was right. It was right after that.
JL and Raffi talking. That was
That
Okay,
was
same
immediate.
here.
That was
probably,
that was
it was probably like the next day. Or
yeah,
so.
very soon after that.
You sure
Is
about
my
that?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's and I was going to comment that they de-aged Picard. In addition to having the kind of flash uniforms.
And you notice like when you see him again, and it's like the present day, he's like speaking in like his warbly,
his haltered,
old John Luke
old,
voice.
withered face.
Dear old.
Let
Patty
the record
Stewart.
show that you were right. The Mars attacks. I checked my sources.
Your
I was
sources.
contacting my sources. That's the word I was looking for. I was a source.
Your sources.
Yeah. So they de-aged. I didn't notice that actually. I mean,
Yeah, it's worth.
I mean, I
it.
totally believe you.
Well, I mean, at first, I'm presuming they did. I don't know if it looked like some digital stuff. Maybe they used more makeup or something. But clearly, they were making him look
definitely
and talk.
sounded different.
He was standing different.
totally
he was
gonna-
more Picard style, which is understandable. But an interesting production note. My understanding from looking at stuff on Twitter is that these first 3 episodes were originally 2 episodes, and early in production, when they had already started filming, they decided. I think when they had already started filming, they started expanding it. They decided to expand it into 3, which I think goes a long way to explain some of the weird editing stuff, particularly in the last episode when the as people are calling it, the Romulan CSI scenes versus the ones in his study. They're intercut all weird. That might have been a side effect of how they decided to like change up the editing after it was written.
That's interesting. So I guess it was just. I guess they just couldn't cut enough to narrow it down, and so they just.
Well, the thing that's confusing though is that they said they expanded it. So in other words, I guess they didn't want to cut things, but if they were far enough along in production, it could have been that they realized, oh, okay, if we're going to keep all this in, it's going to have to be 3 episodes,
Right, so we have to add some stuff,
and or shift some stuff around in a way that who knows. We'll find out in 100 years when they release the classified behind-the-scenes Star Trek Picard documents.
So Raffi's all sensing that the Tal Shiar are involved, and she's probably right. She's probably got most of that down. So I was trying to gather what they. So the Romulans, what I guess just what's happening with these
What's happening?
What's happening?
It's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, that's part of the mystery because nobody has all the pieces yet.
Right. So she's talking about
In other words, what her theory is. Her theory is
she was saying they were sabotaging. John Luke was all like, why would they sabotage their own mission? She's like, for a cover-up. But it's like a cover-up for what, Are they... I mean, I'm guessing, I guess that, the Romulan, the transport and the synth going nuts have to be related, right?
I mean, you'd think, but you don't know. What says they're related,
Well, nothing says it, but, maybe the Romulans made the synths go crazy, so the Federation would hate the synths, because the Romulans were getting integrated from, their planet, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we're moving from our planet, we're getting integrated, so we don't like these synths, so we'll make them attack.
But Raffi didn't know they didn't like the synths at that point.
Well, I don't know if she knows what's but I'm saying that the Romulans maybe, I'm just wondering she's not necessarily called that.
You may be pointing out a flaw in the...
Well, also...
When there's going to be like a big breakthrough where like 2 people that used to be enemies decide to be friends, there's going to be the extremist element that wants to keep the status quo.
I think that you do point out this is perhaps a minor issue, but I think it is an issue in that it seems that there's a big jump between Picard resigns his commission and Raffi sort of gets some fallout as a result of that, and then Raffi hates his guts.
Yeah.
Now I think they do a good job of explaining it, especially the actors in the way they emote. So when you see Picard in the quote unquote present day with Raffi, and she's saying, "You never called me, you never checked to see how I was doing," etc. That's uncharacteristic for Picard, but that could be on purpose. But it's sort of like you'd think she'd have more sympathy. You got the impression that she'd have more sympathy for him, and then he's just lost his job. I wasn't clear on why she thought she was going to lose her job. Because he lost his job.
Right. I wasn't clear on that either. Right. I mean, I guess maybe they thought she was in cahoots with them, or now that Picard's gone, they don't. Yeah,
he didn't do anything wrong. The way I interpreted it is that perhaps they were using fired as shorthand for, I'm going to be taken off this assignment. and I'm going to be blackballed or whatever because they know
later she says that the next scene where it's the present day, she said that she lost her security clearance.
Yeah, and so it seems more like she didn't actually get fired. It was just that she no longer was getting to do the things that she was interested in doing.
Yeah, and I guess it's there to sort of highlight the fact that Picard gets to go home to, the great Picard gets to do whatever he wants, but the great Picard also doesn't realize that his actions have an effect on other people.
Yeah.
And this is another example of him sort of overestimating his worth to Starfleet, at least Starfleet at that time. So either that's marking a change in Starfleet, or it's just this is really highlighting the fact that Picard, I should call him Jean-Luc, that feels weird, JL, LD, like from the Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah,
a little too much LDS.
And what is LDS?
Star Trek 4.
Oh. Yeah.
Zap.
Zoop.
Double dumbass on you.
So Picard...
There shouldn't be cursing in Star Trek. That's a whole nother thing. We can talk about that separate. People are mad about the cursing.
Right.
We'll talk about that in a bit.
So Picard, they're doing something to highlight, and they approached this a little bit actually in DS9 when there was that conversation between Picard and Sisko, where Sisko was all pointing... It was the first time Picard... I'm interrupting myself. It's the first time Picard kind of didn't seem like an asshole, but it kind of showed him as human, and it showed him it showed another side where he's not infallible.
You're seeing him from a different perspective besides this guy's the captain of the Enterprise.
Yeah, and when Sisko's all pointing out these things under the table about killed my wife, blah blah blah. They're basically pointing out to Picard that he thinks he's a piece of shit.
It's like your face was on that view screen when my shit got blown to pieces.
And Picard just kind of uncomfortably tried to move on, showing he didn't know how to handle that situation. So he's kind of fallible there. And so now they're really going with that a lot now too, where he didn't call her forever, he's apologizing. She's all like, F you, Picard, you're the great Picard. And that seems to be that the thing they're highlighting a lot is him sort of not being as valuable as he thought he was. And
okay. So one thing I was thinking about when I was listening to the opening theme again, right? So the opening theme is growing on me quickly. And one thing I kind of liked about it is, I think Jesse had mentioned in a previous episode that there is a pastoral kind of vibe to the theme. And when I was thinking about it, there's two ways you can think of that. There's the Picard being put out to pasture style, right? Which is, he's old and useless kind of thing.
Right.
Or there's the pastoral, the safety, the home, like the Hobbit style thing that you want to protect, and that you have to go off on an adventure to go in order to you have to leave it to save it kind of thing.
And now for the opening, are you referring to the sequence or the music?
The sequence as well, but particularly the music. But the idea being that from the pastoral metaphor that Picard has to leave his home, and I don't even mean the Chateau Picard. That's where he's currently leaving to go on the adventure. He had to leave Starfleet to save, or in his mind, to save Starfleet. But of course, in that intervening time, it wasn't working. He was basically removed himself from the ability to save things. But now he might be on his way back, in the sense, because he's going to go on this adventure in order to save the thing that he had to leave and might never get to go enjoy again.
Starfleet is the actual pastoral homeland. This other thing is it's not really, he's not really comfortable there. It's never anything that's it's really great. You can tell when he wakes up and he looks out the window and it's it's friggin' scenic as shit, but he's just everything's okay.
Well, the opening sequence kind of, alludes to that a little bit by showing space and then showing space sort of building, his eyeballs and things like that. It's all part of Picard. So he's intertwined, that whole, intertwined with space, and you can't take the space out of Picard or...
Yeah.
Oh, and real quick before I forget it, in the recap, they go through real quick, and I know it's not done on purpose, but they made Zhaban sound like kind of a dick, because the way they edited it, they were like, you're going to need somebody who hates you.
Yeah,
and
right.
Nothing to lose, because they edited out the part, his first suggestion about Worf and Riker and Geordi.
Right. Yeah, they edited that out, and it was Picard who was the one who was bringing up the sketchy character.
The way it was edited, it was, you're going to need to take somebody with you. You're gonna somebody who hates you.
Yeah, right.
It's
what a great idea, Zhaban. Yeah, right.
Anyway.
No, I noticed that too, actually. When he all told her that when he told Raffi that he gave Starfleet the ultimatum, Her reaction was kind of weird too. She kind of laughed, did that laugh thing that sort of like, you're joking, right? And it's like, well, what? I don't know. That was a nitpick. I was just kind of like, what did
she was trying to convey that Starfleet without Picard is an unimaginable thing. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's just always when people do that line where they're like, huh, oh, you're serious.
Yeah.
I'm always like,
I feel that.
It's kind of,
okay, I have a question.
Another thing, sorry, real quick, and they didn't do that in this episode, but when someone's all like, come back and get on the ship to save your own life. Don't worry about me. That's an order. When they do that, that's an order line. That bugs me.
That's an order.
Yeah. That's neither here nor there.
So, as our resident digital computer machine man, when Picard says it was a fatal code error, what does that mean anything?
Yeah.
Like a fatal code error made them reprogram the security system to attack itself, and then they all killed themselves.
Is he just trying to say it's a bug? That's all what it sounds like. I mean, fatal program.
Well, to be fair to Picard and to Rafi, they both agreed it sounded like bullshit. They're like, that sounds like some bullshit.
Yeah.
But I mean, that sounds like some extra bullshit. It's like, oh, it's a fatal code error. I mean, shorthand. I know. I'm not trying to complain about it. I was just kind of curious about that.
No, it's kind of nonsense because I guess fatal meaning that
neither one of them is in the engineering branch, so they're not going to give you a bunch of technical babble.
He should have been like, Starfleet said they got like some fucked up subroutines. Those subroutines went and got all fucked up.
Well, usually when your computer's talking about a fatal something or other, right? They do use that word, but it just means it crashed and it doesn't work anymore.
Like blue screen.
It just freezes. So it's not like it's literally fatal. They start killing.
They don't destroy Mars and then kill themselves.
Right.
Yeah, Windows 95 never destroyed Mars.
No,
I mean, at least as far as we know.
Yeah, it just wasn't based off data, so it never got that far along. I guess.
But there was a really good line in that scene where Picard says, "I never dreamed Starfleet would give in to intolerance and fear," which is interesting because you could argue Starfleet's done that before.
They sure have.
But maybe not to this level. And I also think, this is very clearly a metaphor for, quote unquote, the real world.
Yeah. I still don't get like him just sort of just being like, just him so cocky that he thought that he would just make that offer and they would never think
look, a lot of people have mentioned that it seems that a running theme in this show so far is one of hubris.
Yes,
and it's, I think some people are uncomfortable with that from the from Picard of all people. But
I think it's interesting. It's just a hard turn.
But it makes perfect sense for an old man of his experience and what he's done for the world. Not because the thing about hubris is the person who has it doesn't think they have it.
Right.
They're not thinking from that perspective. He's like, we have to do something about this. And he can't believe that they wouldn't even entertain the idea of this little thing. He's
like, come on, give me a ship.
Yeah.
And a crew. Picard, motherfucker.
Very small crew.
It's like, oh, you think you're just going to come in here and get a ship?
Objectively, it is a ridiculous request.
I don't have to be an admiral.
I mean, it's a ridiculous request. It's like the guy who goes, retires from Home Depot and then comes back a couple years later and says he needs to, just root around through the plumbing section.
Just put me in the wood section. I don't have to be a manager. I just want to work the saw.
I just want to advise people on which size windows to get.
Also, it's kind of to that point when they keep bringing up the interview, and every time they talk about the interview, everyone just unanimously agrees that was a big fuck up, that interview.
Which I'm surprised that they're characterizing it that way, because
I didn't think it
wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. In a way,
there's no such thing as bad publicity.
I mean, I guess in a way he revealed too much of how he felt about Starfleet in the wrong way. But he put the reporter in their place. He was basically like, you don't fucking know what you're talking about.
Yes.
And even he's like, no, it was a disaster. And so
I'm
surprised.
The whole Dunkirk business.
Yeah, I know, right?
Dunkirk.
Like, you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I thought, I don't know. Whatever. I mean, I thought the speech was all right, but I don't know.
So,
and then Raffi wants a wild, desperate solution, right? That's another thing.
Yes.
So she wants this wild, desperate solution,
like a Captain Kirk solution.
Yeah, and he was like, "Well, my wild, desperate solution was to, say, I'm going to quit if you don't do what I want,
Yeah.
And
which is a Picard style thing to do. I mean, Captain Sisko would have started like throwing punches.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
It's real.
It's a fake. It's real. And 14 years later or whatever, though, when he finally does meet back up with her, he's all talking about wild, desperate solution. Suddenly she's not into it anymore. So I guess that's just after years of sort of like getting broken, you know.
It's kind of like if you have a lover and you have a torrid love affair, and then you are like, all right, that was good. Let's go. I'll see you later. And then like 10 years later, you come back and you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
You were pretty cool in the first place. Let's get back together. And the other person's like, it took me 7 years to get over you. I stole all of this from The Witcher, by the way, because I just watched The Witcher. And there's basically that scene is right there.
It's a pretty badass show.
What is the CNC? That's
the CNC, Commander and Chief.
Commander in Chief. Oh, okay, Commander in Chief.
Commander in Chief.
Because that's who she was talking about. She was going to get fired by them. But yeah, I guess that makes sense. Is like she was broken and she was out of it.
Because I believe in the present day, it's that Admiral lady that he goes to talk to. It's like, hey, give me a ship.
Then after the opening, we get to the Vasquez Rocks, which is obviously very iconic in the history of Star Trek in particular.
They got a lot of scenic shots of the whole sort of panorama of the place.
I made a list of every time the Vasquez Rocks had been used in Star Trek, and there were a lot more than I even realized, because we think of the iconic one, right? So
the Gorn
Arena, which is with the Gorn, that's the one we think of. That's like the famous classic one, right?
Did they do the one with the I'm Not Jokingly guy?
No, I don't think so.
That was like a set.
They had the first one was Shore Leave, which was that crazy one.
Okay.
Then Arena, then the Alternative Factor and Friday's Child, which were two other TOS episodes. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, the Vulcan scenes. A lot of the Vulcan scenes were actually filmed in that area.
Right on.
Really?
Star Trek 2009, J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek, they filmed in that same area. Again, not necessarily the exact like iconic shot of the rocks, but they did film in that area.
Interesting side note, they always show Into Darkness. They always stream that one, but they never stream the first one.
Yeah.
That's the one I always want to see more.
Speaking of, Into Darkness also filmed some scenes at Vasquez Rocks. TNG, Who Watches the Watchers, starring Bobby Hill.
That's right.
That was at the Vasquez Rocks. Voyager had 2 episodes, Initiations and Gravity.
Wow.
And Enterprise, I just watched this not too long ago. The episode Unexpected, which is where Trip gets an alien chick pregnant, or he gets pregnant by an alien chick, like he gets grows an egg in his belly or something.
Weird.
And she fooled around with him on a holodeck with her magic hands. Mm-hmm. They filmed the alien stuff there.
So Picard is the only instance where it's actually the Vasquez Rocks.
That's what's kind of meta and brilliant about it. Is here's the fucking Vasquez Rocks, motherfuckers.
It's like, you know what this is.
It's funny they can pull that off. It's kind of like the Wilhelm scream or whatever, where it's so it's so obvious what it is at this point, but people still pull it off somehow, and you're like, oh, that's okay. It doesn't. Yeah. You're not like. That makes it completely unbelievable.
Well,
it's just kind of like you. It's like
a real place too. I mean, why wouldn't it be there? Presumably in the future.
Yeah, it's just funny they keep referencing it over and over, but they can still get. But they can still get away with it. There's no.
It was in one of the Bill and Ted movies.
Yeah, it was in Bill.
Fun that they do that.
It's also in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which, as I mentioned last week, is also about sentient androids going crazy, and that movie's also about the meaning of existence.
Speaking of de-aging, I bet there's going to be some major de-aging in the new Bill and Ted movie, probably, right?
I hope so.
Well, I don't know, because it's like them and their daughters. What I've seen,
yeah, but I bet they go back in time at some point and see.
And they're all like radical.
Yeah.
I bet they make them more like 40 instead of like 50.
Yeah, that'd be more believable.
But other than Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, there's actually a pretty long list of a bunch of shows that have been filmed there. But the other one that jumped out at me was an episode of Monk called Mr. Monk and the UFO. I vaguely remember that. I think he has to run up on the rocks at one point, and he's all nervous about it. I think that's the gag.
So what was that shit she was talking about? Snake leaf induced paranoia. Was that shit she was smoking?
Yeah,
that was that shit
she was vaping some janks.
She was vaping some snake leaf, and I want to try it out.
Yeah,
it
right.
Looked good.
It looked real good.
Because I couldn't tell because she didn't look all crazy. I was wondering if it's maybe sort of makes you chill and relax. But then she started talking about paranoia too. So
that's like weed, right?
She had a funny glint in her eye.
It seemed like it was meant to be a direct analog to weed. Because
right.
That's paranoid when you smoke weed.
That's definitely how it was.
After you.
That's definitely how it was presented. But I think it's just kind of funny, the idea of her hanging out with Picard when he visits her, and she's getting high.
You don't get paranoid when it's legal.
If you're at home listening right now, and you're high on marijuana,
I bet you are.
Cops are coming.
No,
they're not.
they're not.
They're totally
Fuck
not
you, Dan.
coming.
The guy knocking on the door is the goddamn delivery man. Answer the door. It's not
Eat
the
your
police.
food.
It's not your fucking mom. It's the delivery dude. And in the future, the way you may have done this, but what you do is you gotta smoke the marijuana, and then you call the delivery.
You do that first.
Then you smoke the marijuana like right before the delivery guy comes,
And then
he doesn't freak you out as
the
much.
food arrives.
Yeah, just sort yourself out, okay?
He comes, then the food arrives. Is that what you just said? You said wait till the delivery guy comes, Patrick, and then Jesse, you said, and then the food arrives. You were implying something.
No, I was not implying.
There were
I was
implications.
extending what he said.
You were extending, not
the guy coming to your door means that the food is there.
Dan, if you leave a 5-star review, Dan will call you up at home and talk to you in nothing but double entendre.
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing.
He'll call you at work. He'll call your boss for you.
Yep. I'll show up at your work, and, I'm really getting really into the part, so if you tell me to leave, I won't. I'll keep showing up.
It's all part of the gag, guys.
You're going to have to call the
all
cops.
part of the show.
And it'll be that kind of thing where even though it's not your fault, you'll still get fired because, I'll be such a nuisance.
I will join Dan, and I will just stand to the side, and when your boss makes a ruckus, I'll just say, don't worry. It's all part of the show.
It's all part of the show, right?
It's all part of the show.
Oh.
Highly interactive. The next step in 4D podcasting.
4D. Oh, yeah, they have those 4D theaters. When I was in some place in Tennessee, it was next to Pigeon Forge, which is...
When were you in Tennessee?
Talking about pigeons.
Talking about Pigeonville up in Tennessee. Oh, Pigeon Forge, that's where the Dolly show.
Geordie LaForge?
Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton.
And there's like an upside down building, and there's
you mean like
church with a bear above it.
Grand Ole Opry?
No, the Opry's not.
That's
I don't
in
think
Nashville.
No. Yeah, the Pigeon Forge is a famous strip, like a tourist spot. It's kind of like Imagine Vegas, but not at all like Vegas.
All right. So
what about Orlando?
I imagine
like
Vegas, and I've now replaced Vegas with a void.
Yeah,
Is it like Orlando?
it's tacky. It's just tacky. There's weird gimmicky things.
So you went
Is it
to
like south
did
of
you
the
go
border?
to a 4D theater there and get shaken about?
Well, I didn't actually get to go in. I was interested because past that there was a mountain sort of tourist spot that we stayed in a hotel there. And I walked by and there was a 4D movie theater. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Then I went by and there was a 5D movie theater. And I was like, what could that possibly be?
What's the fifth one?
I don't know what the fourth one is. I guess
Good point.
I'm guessing they just spray you with more shit. I don't know.
Like just some dude smoking
There's
a
just a
cigar.
hose comes
just
out.
fucking comes and dumps a bucket of fucking water on you.
Right. That's part of the trip is that it's not scripted, so it just kind of happens whenever at each show. It's
What's
part
the
of
fourth one?
Does a
replay value.
guy in a hard hat with a bucket of mud just throw it in your face and then just lean in and whisper, "It's all part of the show."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
5D.
Is it like
you
it's like in
ruin your clothes.
Disney World it was like some kind of Honey I Shrunk the Kids.
6D
type
is
of
a
thing,
section
and they would,
on
like, blow air
Pornhub.
on you, and like it was all 3D. And
I mean, I can only guess that they fuck with you somehow. Yeah, like your butt rumbles or something like that. I don't know.
yeah, like your seat all rumbles. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, did I?
But
who did that?
But then how do they make the leap from 4D to 5D? I don't know. I guess it's not
it's
really
like
important.
smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision. Oh yeah, that was a thing, wasn't it? Or that was
I
in
don't
a
think
book.
that was ever.
No,
a thing.
what book
it's
was
like
that
a Willy
from?
Wonka thing.
No, that was in a book. There was a whole Smola-vision. There was Soma.
Smola-vision.
Soma or Ansible was that was a Ursula K. Le, whatever.
What's
book.
going on in this Star Trek episode?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was fucked up, man. That was fucked up.
Talking about
So
4D and then 5D.
which was the fourth one?
Smola-vision.
Smolavision, Smolens.
Okay.
So there was. So speaking of all the craziness, there was a lot of so she was just like chugging wine at that point, right? And so and she was smoking.
he only brought one bottle.
And
Yeah.
huffing on
I
some,
don't know. I don't
huffing
remember
on
if I
some snakeweed.
brought that up the last time.
You
but
did,
he's-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she
you were
sucked on
right.
it for a while. But at one point she gets up and he looks at her and goes, "Don't, Raffi." Like, don't what? Do you remember that they were all
Yeah,
talking and she was
Raffi.
getting steamed and she had to go.
Oh, he was just like
He's just
she
trying
was
to
mad
play-
at him,
he
and
was
he
trying
was
to
all like,
placate.
"Oh, please."
Yeah,
hello,
but the way he
please."
delivered it, it sounded like he was like, "Don't kill those people" or something. I don't know.
Don't.
Yeah.
It's just stressed emotional. So, what do you think about this? So, Some people, I've heard this analogy online that they said Picard is shaping up to be sort of like an RPG where there's like the main character leaves a small village and sort of gets into some danger and starts collecting teammates along the way to like help him, which is fair. On the other hand,
that's like a game Mass Effect that I brought up before.
My counter to that is that's just the Joseph Campbell, hero's journey monomyth thing. It's pretty standard. But it's an interesting way to look at it because it is different than previous incarnations of Trek, where he really is kind of building this together.
It's cool to look at it that way, but it definitely is sort of deviates from that. You see the elements of that kind of Joseph Campbell Jenks, but his pastoral homeland is something that he wants to leave.
Yeah.
Now, did you expect it?
And other, etc.
So he got his crew, right? He out of like a video game RPG or whatever, the Arch Campbell's story goo.
Joseph Campbell.
Right.
Arch Campbell.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Not everybody's going to get that.
Language is about understanding what the person means, and you understood what I meant, right? So that's all. Sort of. So anyway, sorry. So he got on they get on the ship, right? And that's kind of like. Well, I mean, is that jumping too far ahead? I don't know. But it's kind of just the idea of like, did you ever expect it? Did you expect the show to go? What direction did you expect the show to go? Did you expect them to sort of like get that moment where they were all together? And it's and it's like,
totally.
This is Star Trek.
No, that's exactly.
It felt
he's like
Star
engaged.
Yeah, right.
They go.
You saw that happening. I mean, it's not like I didn't see that happening.
Right.
But I didn't predict like how I'd feel when it happened. When it happened.
Well,
when it happened, I was like, And
it's like Ravi's all like, well, I'm not going to join up with you. But then like she shows up in the end, and you're like, of course she shows up.
Right.
Like what else is she going to do?
Right. It's like I'm not joining your team. I'm just hitching a ride.
I also like that they didn't. I think they were smart enough. And they've done a good job storytelling wise. Is they're smart enough not to play those beats too hard because they are predictable. Mm-hmm. They didn't try to make it like it was some mega surprise that Raffi was on there. It's a surprise, but they played it as like this is coming.
Yeah,
Did you see?
She's right there.
Did you see the Dr. Agnes Girardi? Did you predict that she? I guess in retrospect, it seems very predictable.
So we got to get to that. We got to get to
that,
but I want to talk more about that because there's some interesting stuff around that I was thinking about. But first, just real quick, the next part is where they are on the Borg ship. That cool like shot where it's on the one hand it's kind of actiony, but it was slow moving through the Borg cube.
There's a lot of parallels between Discovery, right?
Yeah, but they slow it down, they calm it down a little so it's not so crazy. I think if Discovery was doing this, you would have been like bouncing around that Borg cube like a pinball machine.
Yeah, it would have been rolling around,
which would have been a different kind of cool. But this fit the show.
There'd be more boobs.
Right?
Yeah, I dug it.
But one thing, right? Last week, I may be forgetting this. I may be misremembering this. I thought when they were operating on that Borg, they said they didn't know what species it was.
Right.
But then she speaks to it.
Then she figured out his language.
And I didn't catch that last week.
Yeah.
But I sort of thought about it this week when he was
interesting. I didn't catch that either.
Because Hugh, who we meet, who is awesome.
Who I didn't realize until
that's Hugh?
later on.
That's Hugh?
Yeah, I didn't realize it because it was like a throwaway line where she refers to him as Hugh or whatever.
And
I'm like, wait a
okay,
minute.
I didn't realize
because I was
that.
actually the second time I watched, I was like, wait, what's that guy's name? And they only said it like offhandedly, which I like that they did it that way.
I was very impressed with the actor who really plays him. He re-enters that voice of Hugh from TNG, but with the 20 years or so, with that, like, clearly he's evolved a little bit, but he still has some of the same mannerisms, some of the same speech patterns, some of the same tilt of the head and things like that. So anyway, but that scene was interesting for a lot of reasons. You introduce Hugh, you start learning more about what his deal is. He's fucking running the show.
Is this
here.
when we find out that she's actually an anthropologist? Was there been any mention of that before?
No, but the implication was there from her, some of the stuff she was talking about, because she was all talking about like this and that and learning language and stuff like that. So this, and I was going to comment, having a background in anthropology, that they get cultural anthropology way more right with her than with Burnham. Because Burnham is a xenoanthropologist, but effectively what they're saying is she's a cultural anthropologist for aliens. And I got nothing against it, just Burnham, that just the way they write it doesn't sound like an anthropologist would speak. The way they write Soji actually sounds like actual anthropologists talk, and not just
A
the
shared
words.
mythological framework.
Well, it's not just the words; it's the attitude, the idea that she sits behind the Romulan because she knows that's important to that traditional culture.
Exactly. She knows how to talk to her.
And she does it. She takes. It's not just talk; it's action,
Yeah.
and fits. And she knows that's what you would see an actual anthropologist do if they were trying to interact with somebody in that situation. She wouldn't just sit there and be like, "I know your myths."
Right.
Derp-a-der.
Right.
Yeah, they get I always like, for example, it's kind of lateral, but when they do psychologists and shows and things like that, how accurate are those psychologists and which shows got it right?
That's easier to get right, though.
Yeah, but
I think
everyone seems to get it wrong. Usually if you ask, like,
Well, I think it depends. My guess is that Michael Zhaban and some of or at least somebody on that show he probably has more familiarity with that kind of area of content, which would make sense for somebody who's a fiction writer who wants to learn. It's a good source of inspiration is anthropological stuff. So
so Hugh, he was the head of what was it? The head of Romulan reclamation,
Right,
which we
yeah.
still
Yeah.
don't really know a lot about this reclamation project, do we?
Right. Not exactly.
So he's
We're only learning like what they're doing piece by piece.
yeah. For example, he was with the line he was saying about some people are scared of the Borg, XBS, I'm assuming XBs, I'm guessing means like ex-Borg or whatever. And then some people want to lock him away. The Romulans want to do both. But then they made him the head of like the reclamation
Yeah,
project,
right.
and he's an ex-Borg. So I don't know. And what was interesting though, at the same time they made him the head of that stuff, Soji was able to access things that he wasn't.
Yeah.
So he was able to let her into places and stuff. And he had, I guess, he had a higher
Is some
role.
of that because she's with that sexy Romulan guy?
Well, no,
Oh.
he was surprised because remember he came in at the end.
he was surprised,
He was.
too.
There was a part of that conversation was kind
Yeah.
of like, how the fuck did you know that shit?
Right. That's you find that,
You know?
all of a sudden she's like, well, I didn't know that.
Well-
All of a sudden I just knew it. It's just like when her sister was like, all of a sudden I was kicking ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason she knew it might not be because of the documents she read, because she said she had. It's like, I guess
Oh,
it's
exactly.
a question.
Yeah.
Now, which
She had unclassified.
The answer
documents.
only made sense if my interpretation is she had that information in her brain. She can't
Right.
remember how she got it.
Right, that's what I was
because
thinking.
it was inserted there.
Yeah.
And she just made up this excuse like, well, the files security doesn't always work. And she didn't say, I looped up the file.
That's
Right,
not
no.
going to be an unclassified.
No, that
document.
part I definitely thought that was from robot memory. But when she initially said beep boop, talking about something with the fucking right before they went into Ramda, played by Rebecca Wysocki.
Yeah, she's been on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
she was on The
She
Expanse.
looked very familiar. Oh, word. Yeah.
Yeah, she did look
That's
familiar.
where she's. Yeah.
But before he goes in, she talks about he was like, how'd you get that information? And she's like, if you just like ask around, I find that people are willing to give information. He was like, not for me.
Yeah.
So that was separate from her.
You're a weird old ex-Borg dude. and
Yeah.
I'm a hot young chick.
So I was wondering if that was also a made-up thing where she thought that's what happened, but then it didn't. But I'm guessing no. I'm guessing that she actually probably asked and got it, and he didn't.
Well, it's
I
an
don't
interesting
know.
when
it's
you
hard
start
to figure out which is which.
It is because when
Yeah.
you're talking about she's an unreliable narrator of her
Yeah.
own actions and her own thoughts because we're not convinced that she has full control, and she certainly doesn't seem to have full awareness of what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Dodge didn't
But-
seemingly.
she knew about Dodge. Now, did you think that they knew about each other? Well, they obviously knew about each other because they had the necklace, right?
They somehow knew about each other.
No, they
how
knew.
mu- How much did they
when
actually
she,
know?
remember
But
when
they
she
just
called,
knew that they existed. They didn't know
Right.
about
Exactly.
them, right?
Yeah. They just knew that. We only know that they knew that they existed.
Well, no, we know that we presume they think they're sisters because she
Yeah,
says,
right.
"Mom, how's
They're
Dodge?"
sisters,
and,
yeah.
and the fake mom, Robot Maddox or whoever the fuck it is,
Yeah, but they
lied
knew
to her.
they knew they were
Yeah.
sisters beforehand. Well, they didn't know. Okay,
They're programmed
she-
to think they're sisters.
She knew, but from that necklace was at the first or second episode. I think it was the first one she was talking about. That's when what's the guy Narek, the weirdo, creepy guy, the Romulan? Is it Narek?
Sexy Romulan.
Is that his
Romulan.
name?
But he was she was
Treadwell.
when he laid out that heavy line about how he had his brother, but his brother like
Yeah.
melted or something, and it was all heavy and weird to say. That was in response to her saying, "Oh, this necklace, this is supposed to be 2 rings for sisters or something." And so I thought she knew that she had a sister.
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
both. They
But
both
my
knew.
assumption was that she didn't. My assumption up to that point was that she knew she had a sister, but she didn't necessarily have any contact with her since childhood.
Well,
don't
forget there was that whole thing of the Romulan CSI was them looking at the communications between the sisters.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Totally.
But I mean, it's not like thrown in your face, which is great. I think that's overall good writing. But
I'm stupid.
No, you're not the
you're the least stupid.
Oh, guys.
So okay, so
guys.
So then we get to the the point with Rios, right? So
this guy's awesome.
You get to go, and so here's the thing: when I was looking at the previews, I was concerned. I'm sure other people were as well, that Rios might end up being sort of your standard Han Solo derivative type. Right. And I really like because he seems to be fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like he's a troubled person. He's like a weird dude. He has a bunch of holograms.
His emergency holograms are all...
They all look like him.
And I felt like
But with different accents?
Yeah. The different accent thing, I couldn't figure out what was going on with that. But it also seems like he's kind of has a sexual attraction. Like I was getting that vibe again, because they had this sort of romantic way
you can tell how they interact. It's a little bit.
And the thing is,
it's like he's in love with himself or something like that, but he probably also hates himself at the same time or something.
The first time watching it through, I was confused and really didn't catch it. The second time, it was much clearer that there are two different holograms. One was the emergency medical hologram who talked with a British accent,
and then there was a working class British accent,
and then there was an emergency navigational hologram that spoke with an Irish accent, and they also had different personalities. The doctor one was more sort of like worried and pessimistic.
The Irish dude got in his face and was like, "Listen, dude,"
and he was all cheery and talking basically talking like a Catholic priest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. I remember writing down EMH and wondering what that stood for. But did they actually stay out? They said that.
Yeah, and the first one he refers to as an EMH, and he did medical care. The second one he said, "There's no navigational emergency. We don't need you." So you can imply
giant hunk of titanium. Tritanium.
I think you're going to start talking about something else.
Titanium shrapnel.
And the question now, that then leads to the question, how many more of these motherfuckers does he have on this ship? Does he have like a German one who's an engineer?
I hope we find out, yeah.
I want to see all the different accents this actor has to do.
I hope there's like somebody from...
It's like he's playing a schizophrenic person, even though he's like not schizophrenic, but he kind of is because he's offloading these parts of his personality.
Exactly.
These different holograms.
Right, they're just different aspects of himself, and he's like arguing. There's friction between him and these other holograms.
Sexual tension.
There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of in this Star Trek, not only drinking, which is there's not like drinking's new to Star Trek, but it's a little bit more out there.
It's a little more abusive drinking.
But there's more smoking going on too. He actually reminded me of like
some cigar.
He reminded me of some Hugh Jackman Wolverine kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Like not that that's who he was, but
it was reminiscent of that.
Yeah, it's sort of like a kind of a mix. But he was his own thing, like you said, because he's freaking nuts. Like he had that injury, and Picard's even like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing," or something. I forget what he says. I didn't die, right? Yeah, and so, but that's like, why did they put that scene? Why did they just? I guess not saying that to be like that was dumb. I was just like, why did they put that in there? That's so weird. I guess just to give us the idea that he's like, kind of a fucking weird guy.
He's got a checkered past, and he's a badass.
Did you catch the name of the ship that he talked about that was erased from history?
I didn't catch the significance.
Ibn Majid or something?
Yeah, the Ibn Majid, Ahmed Ibn Majid, who was a famous Arab navigator from the 1430s, who the stories say that he was the one who helped Vasco da Gama navigate from Africa through to India. Although there are scholars who disagree that actually happened, but that's the lore from ages past that was his role in that. But he was definitely a famous navigator from that time period.
All I got was that he was the XO of a heavy cruiser named that. I don't know. Is it like an XO's thing to be kind of like really good at your job, but also like too fucked up to be captain or something like that? Because there's that whole Battlestar. What's his name from Battlestar?
There's Riker.
Yeah, and Riker.
Not every XO is like.
No, you're right on Battlestar too.
He's a total like hopeless alcoholic, and just. And then this guy, he's kind of nuts. You can imagine him.
So I found it conspicuous that they didn't mention the name of his captain. He referred to I've already seen like another famed captain, you know, I saw their brains smeared across the bulkheads. I want to know if they didn't
somebody we know.
Yeah, is it did they not mention the name just because who cares, or
is it Nog?
Or
Nog?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be because you know Aaron Eisenberg is dead, sadly.
Yep.
But is it somebody that we're gonna? I don't know. Maybe it's a throwaway nothing, but it jumped out at me that maybe that's somebody that we're gonna know because it seemed conspicuous that he wasn't like, I saw Captain blah blah blah. You know, his brains splattered across.
Yeah, like we'll probably figure out more what's going on with this guy.
Or they might. That's the thing that is tricky about those is when they tell you and if they decide to put that into the story somehow.
Was it Captain Janeway? Like who fucking was it? I mean, she's an admiral at that point. Maybe it's Captain Paris. Captain Chakotay. It could be.
I hope it's fucking Captain Paris.
Could be Captain Chakotay because Seven's coming up.
Could be
Captain, I keep hearing about this.
Captain.
Seven
What's that guy? Harry somebody.
Harry
Kim. Now he would never make it a captain. He's Captain Ensign. That was determined in Voyager.
Captain Ensign.
every mother. Tom Paris, who was a fucking criminal, got a promotion on Voyager, but Harry Kim couldn't manage it
because there was a story like I was reading about behind the scenes, and I guess the actor was always showing up late or something. I don't know. That's probably
I don't know if it's true or not, but I think I read some of that stuff too.
So when he Rios when Picard says I'm not in the habit of consulting lawyers before I do what needs to be done, do you think he was just pandering to Rios there, or do you think Picard because I'm sure.
It's
because
true.
He was like I don't consult with anybody.
Picard,
so it seems like Picard was trying to just be like, yeah, I'm cool with you, man. It's cool, you know.
Even though the tradition has always been that Kirk is the swashbuckler and Picard was the diplomat, and those characteristics are fair.
Well, Picard's not unreasonable. Picard was very calculated. I'm not sorry. I meant Kirk. But Kirk is not some unreasonable.
Kirk did plenty of diplomatic shit,
but he was playing stuff
and
out.
Picard, yes, he was the more staid diplomatic type, but he's used to being at the edge of everything in a sense and making his own decisions.
Right.
And of course, he called Starfleet and would subspace this, but often they weren't able to. He's used to making his own decisions. I think it was just kind of reiterating that's he's used to doing what the fuck he wants to do, which is why he's no longer in Starfleet because
in TNG though, when the admirals resisted him, he'd somehow fuck their shit up. Right. The what was that one with the court scene where he made her he I forget the name of that episode.
The drumhead,
that's what it
was.
He
quoted her dad.
Drum beat.
And she got all mad. The drumhead. The drum beat that'd be an awesome episode.
But it doesn't
be a short trek.
Doesn't matter. He seems to always fuck him up. He was reading some book by some philosopher, Miguel de Unamuno, The Tragic Sense of Life.
Yeah,
I don't have to read this.
Read that.
I don't have to read this out loud, but I did write down when that quick scene before the other Electro Doctor came up and was all laughing at him.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's just a bunch of nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's some old philosophy. It's something about suffering is the path of consciousness, and by it living beings arrive at the possession of self-consciousness. For to possess consciousness of oneself, to possess personality, is to know oneself, and to feel oneself distinct from other beings. And this feeling of distinction is only reached through an act of collision, through suffering more or less severe, through the sense of one's own limits. Oh, the end of the line of the first paragraph, it was, we personalize the all in order to save ourselves from nothingness. And the only mystery really mysterious is the mystery of suffering. Anyway, so...
Although
there's no mystery in
this is some ancient philosophy shit.
All of that does really apply quite well to an android trying to figure out what the fuck is their deal.
Just like classic philosophy circle talking kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right, I guess, like... When you just said right there, though, about androids, that got me... that reminded me, like, when the first one, the medical one, was warning him to Picard, he's always like this. I don't remember why.
Yeah, he was very pessimistic, too. He's like, you might be too late. He was going to die. He wasn't a doctor. Like, a normal doctor would be like, we're going to save his life. He was just like, I don't know.
He said something about... he was warning him about Rios' behavior, and Picard goes, duly noted,
Right.
Yeah.
So... I mean, how much is when you acknowledge synthetic life, how much of that is just sort of like a romantic display of ignorance, when you anthropomorphize an animal, and the end result is like you're misinterpreting their goals, for example, right? So you see an animal, a monkey or whatever, smiling, and that's seems like, oh, it's so cute, but really it's
or like when monkeys smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, and you think that's adorable, but Really?
Or I forget who said it with Wittgenstein. Somebody said if a lion could speak English, you would still not be able to understand
It's probably
each
a
other.
Wittgenstein, yeah.
Because you would have no frame of reference. Like
Right.
the lion's
Right.
experience is so different that how could you interpret it? Granted, on the other hand, holograms
It's some
theoretically
Darmok
are
and
programmed
Jalad
to like
business.
understand that more. The hologram thing is interesting because they have the hologram in the Starfleet archives. These EMH and ENH guys and whoever else, the guy might have a million, holograms going on.
I hope so. I hope we meet all of these.
So you have holograms, you have synth, you have Borg, right? I mean, they're clearly playing around, and there's a hint of that. It's similar to what they do in Blade Runner 2049, where they have the layers of synthetic life, because you have the Blade Runner android himself, and then he has a hologram who is like his girlfriend, and she's she's like a lower level down of artificial intelligence.
But at what point does Picard just respect like synthetic life as valuable as real life? And the danger is when you anthropomorphize things, is what's to say that hologram, because the way he was talking about hologram, it was just obviously we talked to Siri or Google or whatever like that, but it just got me thinking of, what does Picard think of that particular holographic life? Does he think of it as real life? And the thing is, if it acts like a human and you value it as such, what really makes it more valuable than like an old ass tree, right? So
I thought you were saying an old ass man like Picard.
Because that dude's just like, when he gets annoyed, he's just like, okay, we'll end. Deactivate.
Right.
Deactivate the hologram.
And at what point, obviously, it doesn't seem like Picard would value that hologram as a real life, but he does data, right? He values data as a real life. And
there must be some distinction.
Maybe that'll come up.
Yeah.
Because obviously the EMH from Voyager eventually was accepted to have sentience and rights. It was a very similar, although more extended version of what Data went through.
It's just when you treat like robots like they have the same goals as people do, stuff like that. It's kind of like that attitude can prevent you from furthering that AI technology itself, because, well, what if you had to do crazy medieval-looking experiments on a robot, and it looks all gross and horrible, but it's just
and the robot is like, it's fine. Well, like
it's just a fucking robot. So if the person feels sorry for the robot and they make them stop, well, you're hindering progress
like
that way by treating it like a human.
In TNG's Disaster, when Riker has to take Data's head off, and
I always hated when they had to pull his fingernail back.
but the interesting thing is that's an obvious question that comes up when they're already talking. The whole premise of this show is data, sentience, these androids, slaves, blah, 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 blah. They did not need to have the holograms. They didn't need to have the one in the archive. They did not need to have the one. And it wasn't just, it looks cool and in the future we'll have holograms. Clearly, that's got to be a narrative choice. Maybe if it was only the hologram in the archives or something, but to have two holograms and probably more on this ship that Picard's going to be the hologram, and whether they're a person or not, and slavery, that's got to come into this story.
Well, I think it is part of the narrative, because if you look at the holograms, they were kind of representations almost of what... It's almost like Rios was expressing himself, his sensitive side, through those holograms' existence. They express something about himself that he can't.
The holograms are going to be different facets of this dude and like his struggle with himself.
Right, and so there's like another mimicry of life, right? Now, who's alive and who are you supposed to, how does that reflect on stuff? So that kind of, the whole sort of is all these questions about what does life mean in synthetic life and things like that. But right, they're all sort of different facets of his personality, because he seems to be a socially awkward kind of guy, I mean, not, maybe awkward's the wrong word, but kind of off. I don't know.
So then we have the whole thing where Jurati is sitting listening to music, which the internet tells me was the opera that
some kind of opera.
The opera that Culber in Discovery likes. That he likes that opera, and then
which one is that?
The Doctor.
No, which opera is it?
I don't. It's an alien opera. So
it's a made up. It's made up stuff.
Caecilian opera.
Yeah,
Caecilian. Okay.
It's the one where
by Jeff Russo.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's apparently like if the person who sings it, like I think they die. Like they sing a note so high they like shatter their brain or something.
It's much better than that Klingon opera shit.
No, I like Klingon opera.
Science fiction opera.
Klingon opera bums me out.
So she's sitting there with her AirPods in.
With that cool ass machine in the sky.
Yeah, that thing was all hanging up there.
She's not even looking at it.
Yeah, right.
She's sitting on a bench.
That's there every fucking day.
And Commodore O shows up with her hip sunglasses.
I don't like this Commodore O one bit.
So
She's up to no good.
All right. So first, I guess let's get it out of the way. Commodore O sunglasses, huge controversy on the internet. Some people are super pissed off. I couldn't care less. I thought she was just being spyish.
Yeah.
You know?
When I saw that, I couldn't care. I didn't care either.
What were the concern?
Why was she wearing sunglasses? And for two reasons. I think one was just why would somebody be wearing sunglasses in Star Trek, which that's silly. The other reason is that Vulcans have a third eyelid or whatever to protect their eyeballs, and we know that from Spock because he got flashed with some light and instead of going blind.
Because they have a crazy desert planet.
So I guess I don't know. Do you think it was any sort of they were just trying to? Yeah, was it trying to be like, oh, she's a spy? I don't know. At the time, I didn't give a shit, but at the time, I was thinking.
I think she's trying to be inconspicuous.
At the time, I was thinking, oh, someone's gonna probably mention this and have an issue with this.
There's one thing I kind of hope it's not. Somebody did suggest it. It sounds stupid, and I'm kind of hoping it's not. Somebody was like, what if she's from the mirror universe? Because they set that up with Lorca, that he had the mirror universes, the wavelengths.
So instead of a goatee, she has a sunglass.
Well,
light sensitive. Oh,
because Lorca, remember, in the mirror universe,
he couldn't see with his eyeballs.
Yeah.
But she was in a fairly bright room when she was talking to.
I don't think
exactly. I think that's crazy.
I don't expect to see much mirror universe because
it shouldn't.
There wasn't much mirror universe in TNG.
Never was. Yeah.
Never.
But so anyway. There's that scene, and it's very short, but it's very suspicious because we do not see what happens there. And then we'll get to the scene in a bit, but I think the whole Jurati thing, I think there's something going on there. I think something happened more suspicious.
Yeah.
They didn't just talk because
she was like, I got to get out of here.
Because here's the thing. Later, and I guess we can just skip to that part because they tie together. She shows up at Picard's house. She has a gun for some reason.
Yeah, that was weird. Where'd she get that fucking gun?
Which is weird.
Well,
she shoots the Romulans. The Romulans.
She's got a Romulan weapon.
This expert Talgiar Romulan death squad goes in through the front door of a guy's house. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some Picard. Has
he had some kind of crazy. He had some kind of
crazy
system because they knew before they were coming because they knew that they were on the way because they were able to get ready. They were like, oh, they tripped the alarm.
There's something going on.
It was pretty badass that they could all fight. I liked also the fact that Picard tried to get a shot in, but ultimately he got his ass whooped. I thought
did like that.
That they didn't make him.
But here's the
there
thing,
were phasers hid under tables.
Yeah,
and stuff,
yeah.
But with Jurati, the thing that didn't sit well with me was, and she explains that she desperately wants to go on this mission. And she states that her reason is because if there's another one of these out there, if this miracle that she dreamed of not only witnessing, but perhaps participating in the creation of, she wants to go see this person. And in the moment, you're like, that's great. That sounds great. You're right. Of course, that makes sense for your character. You're all into this particular research area, and now here's the epitome of that research. Of course you'd want to meet this person, even at the risk to your own life. And, you're going with Captain Picard, blah, blah, blah. What doesn't make sense, though, is before she was talking with Commodore O, she wasn't in any fucking hurry to go anywhere. She knew what Picard was up to. She had already heard all this information. She's sitting on a park bench looking at a fucking lake.
Yeah.
Listening to some crazy-ass music.
No fire then.
Commodore O chats with her, and then all of a sudden she's shooting down Romulans, and she wants to go on this mission desperately. Now, the one caveat is she kind of says Commodore O, or she implies somehow that Commodore O suggested that Picard was going to, go off on some mission to go find this person. But I don't buy that. She could have sussed that out on her fucking own. Why Picard was asking all these details and was saying, I've got to find Commander Maddox. I mean, he was already planning on going. So
I mean, what? I mean, would it be something as straightforward as they bribe her and say, "Oh, we'll give you a super awesome synthetic wing" or something like that? I mean, that seems kind of on the nose, a little obvious.
I'm hesitant to comment because there's a brief snippet in a preview that I've seen screen caps of on the internet, and I don't want to mention what's in it. Maybe at the end of the podcast, but because it could potentially be a spoiler, because there's something that conversation between Commodore O and Jurati in the previews long ago that they showed us that Picard was coming. There's a brief snippet of a scene that's that scene, but we didn't see it in this show. and something happens in that scene that suggests that maybe something else is going on there. So anyway, I'm suspicious, but I don't think Jurati's like an evil bad person or something. I just think there might be something going on.
I don't think
there.
there's any indication of that.
I think there's something going on there that's not like 100% kosher.
No.
On sort of the other side of that, it was kind of when she goes, "Oh, and there's something I didn't tell them," and then it like cuts away for a while, and that big thing that you're like, "What did she not tell them? What's the clickbait here?" And it's like, "I'm coming with you guys."
I like it when she's all like, "Who are you, lady?"
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
And then she just looks at her like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
So let's jump back real quick because I think it's important to mention the whole scene with Ramda. We touched on it briefly, but first of all, the disordered Borg. The disordered, as they call them. Which is
so
cool.
they didn't really clarify what the disordered mean, other than all the they word that it's like all the disordered are Romulan,
and these were the only Romulans that were assimilated.
So all the disordered were Romulan, and all the Romulans that got assimilated were disordered. So only disordered are assimilated Romulans. See, it went both ways because there was
like
no.
Maybe these Romulans were the Romulans in that secret group of Romulans.
That's what. That's the
hate the synths.
Well,
yeah, they were on like a special ship.
Yeah, they were on that little scout.
Wait, these
ship.
are the secret Jatfash or whatever.
Well, he's suggesting that maybe they were.
Perhaps, that's how they shut down the Q.
Wait, the disordered were the insane ex-Borg, right? Romulans.
Yes, but they said that they were all from a ship. That Borg ship. That what they outlined was that Borg ship encountered a small Romulan ship. It attacked the ship and began to assimilate the crew of that ship.
And
then shortly thereafter, the cube collapsed.
And these were the only Romulans that the Borg ever got.
Well, here's the thing: we have seen this, and this is going to be an important point to make to see if they decide to retcon this or not. We have seen Romulan Borg before on Voyager, and I think on TNG. There were some, there were some, and in fact on TNG, the whole start of the whole Borg business, where like the Borg business, like after Q introduces, all that stuff. Long story short, it's along the Romulan neutral zone that the shit with the Borg is going down, where they keep finding those whole settlements completely vaporized on both the Romulan side and the Federation side. So the Romulans think the Federation is using some weapon against them. The Federation thinks the opposite. It turns out in the end that it's the Borg, right? So we know the Romulans have encountered the Borg a shitload, like right from the beginning. It's possible they're going to retcon that and say that the Borg had never actually tried to assimilate a Romulan before, which doesn't make any sense.
Or it's the unreliable narrator thing, because we only know this information from that character.
Yeah, exactly. But I like that the disordered were really reminiscent of the Borg that Lore was doing all those experiments on in the Descent two-parter. Because in the Descent two-parter, which is where Hugh kind of, he went off and tried to start his own collective, but then like Lore, they were all like chaotic. They didn't know how to fucking do it because they didn't know the rules of like holding like congressional meetings and stuff. So they were all like, their community was all like going crazy. And then Lore shows up and gives them leadership. But of course he's a fucking space robot Hitler. So he started fucking everything up. And then he started doing experiments because he was saying that they had the wrong idea, that he said he could make them like all technological, that the biological stuff was like bad. So it's kind of like the opposite of this, where they're trying to make the robots all biological. Like Lore was trying to make them all robotic. But in that episode with Lore, he has all these Borg that he did experiments on, and they're doing the same things these Borg are. They're kind of like wandering around and all twitchy and all like looking at they look like it's an insane asylum. And I'm sure that they were trying to evoke that in a sense with these disordered Borg.
Yeah,
the guy's got some kind of funny Rubik's cube thing.
Yeah,
that thing was weirding me out.
When she when she was gonna shoot herself for a second there, I was like, oh, here's the scene where she kills herself. But then she like saved her. That was slightly. I mean, having not seen really any advanced previews, I didn't see whether that actor. I did thought that actor that character's end was like going to be.
I thought so.
I thought she was actually going to die, and they pulled a sneakiness. But this disordered so. They're the last ones that came to this cube before the cube had a submatrix collapse, and all this crew happened to be there was a Romulan ship, but then they got assimilated, and then they're back, and then they're the only one of these disordered. There's just some kind of name they give them. They're all Romulan, and somehow you think there's an implication that they sort of gave their lives or their minds to like bring down this Borg cube somehow?
Well,
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, like maybe they had something to do with the fact that this thing.
The other theory is if you buy into
function.
if you buy into the Romulans are actually synths theory, then the idea is that the Borg trying to like assimilate the synths caused a problem.
It's gonna have trouble
because they weren't.
Yeah.
It wasn't biological, and so something weird happened there. I don't know if I buy that, but
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it'd be more political. Like, you know, the Romulans, they didn't like the growing relationship with the Federation or something when they were getting rescued, and then they were like, well, we'll start a synth war because we know how for some reason, even though we don't talk to them. I don't know. And then that would sort of cause a rift. I don't know.
I think that's just the illusion.
It just
there's going to be something else that's actually.
So you don't think it has really to do with like the sort of speciesism or whatever you call it between Romulans and
I don't know. I think
synths?
there's something else
Synthetics.
going on.
Is it bad to say synths? Is not inappropriate?
I mean, it's difficult to say.
Synthesizer enthusiast.
Synthetic sympathizer is also known as a synthesizer. Synthetic sympathizer is a
So
The artifact.
I think the key thing, I mean, it's a good scene, but I thought the interesting thing was that Ramda was making a real big deal about that myth was not the correct word.
Yeah, right.
Which you could interpret that a few different ways. I kind of took it to mean a clue that the quote unquote stories of the past were in fact true, in that they're not stories, you know, I mean, because you think of myth as either an exaggerated or wholly fictional version of events, whereas she seemed to be trying to get the message across that this is real information. Now, what the stories are, I don't think we don't know all yet. We've heard a little about the Zatbash, of course.
She kept using different words like, you know, fortunes, which is like, is it a mandala, you know, mythologies, it's scripture, sacred stories, legendarium. Have you ever heard that word before?
Yeah, the legendarium. I'm
stupid. I don't know. I mean, I can figure out what it means, but, you know, it's just, I've never heard that before.
A computer is going to have like a very long memory. And if you have some sort of like synthetic mind or something, you can imagine that you have this long memory. So whatever like people think of as mythology, you know, mythology is like it is what it is. But like, you know, humans typically have a very short memory, a very short lifespan.
Are you saying computers don't have any sort of chronological?
Right, a computer is going to be like, well, this isn't mythology. This is what happened because I can remember it.
Yeah, well, she was calling it the news or whatever.
Right, exactly.
So
right.
That's, like, and, I mean, I guess you could say it's the news in the sense
that this is what happened because we know this because we can remember it.
I guess you could say any kind of sort of like, for example, the rapture, that you could call that the news because it's telling us what's happening now. It's meant to predict. I mean, and math and computers and stuff are all about prediction and being able to.
It's real.
And to be able to use like sort of equations and things to sort of predict what happens.
Well, and then there's
they can take sort of they can get that data and then sort of predict what's happening now and call it the news.
And don't forget, she says, "I know you from tomorrow."
Yeah, that was weird too.
Yeah.
So there's some crazy time confusion.
That was also
too.
pretty freaky.
Yeah, and Soji goes, "We never met." And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, you never met because it hasn't happened yet. You know, like that's kind of a weird. That was a weird. Anyway, whatever. But yeah,
which one are you?
Which one?
Dodge.
Oh, yeah.
Soji,
The one who lives or the one who dies?
Yeah, that was fucked up.
It's interesting. I mean, so
the destroyer of life, the end of it all.
To be fair,
the end of all.
This could go multiple directions. I feel like it's going in a cool direction. It is totally possible that this is some silly bullshit, and the whole storyline will collapse into some lameness because it could go. It depends which direction they decide to go with this, but it really seems that they're taking a lot of cues from Deep Space Nine and like the prophets and stuff. So where there was a bunch of mythological gobbledygook, but then it could be placed and mapped onto real explainable events, and that was kind of the fun of the story, was sort of meshing the spiritual mythological version of things with what actually happened and how they actually mesh very, very well, depending on how you interpret, you know, the limitations of language and interpretation, which was kind of neat. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens next in this area.
So the mom thing, we established that their mom is some kind of
got to be some sort of robot or it's
woman.
a digital avatar mask that Maddox wears when he talks to them and gives a command that puts them to sleep.
Yeah. Because she just went right to sleep.
Do you think like they have? So I was thinking about
Like
she's
a
talking about her
minder.
sister. She seemed pretty unaware of what her sister was up to. Now, what supposedly they're 3 years old or something? If they've confirmed that, isn't that something their memories?
They said their personalities were created 3 years ago.
So-
that doesn't mean that doesn't mean they think they're 3 years old. They have memories of being children.
So maybe there's a whole bunch of them too. I don't know. There could be a whole.
they keep talking about a nest.
Yeah, they nest and a whole, and not just a nest of different kinds of synthetics, but maybe all sort of Soji Dodge kind of stuff. Because she seems pretty ignorant of what her sister's up to or something.
Well, I don't know because I mean I don't think I didn't get the impression she was ignorant. She probably knew her sister was accepted to Daystrom and hanging out in Seattle or in Boston or there was no reason. There was no suggestion that she wasn't in contact because she immediately asked her mom, "How's Dodge?"
Yeah.
You know, she hasn't heard from Dodge. How's Dodge?
Yeah.
And then the mom starts saying some bullshit about, this, that, and the other thing.
Got a puppy.
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to, that's an interesting, we'll see where that goes. It's pretty cool. I like the idea that they can put her to sleep if necessary. And she sort of, lets her calm down a little bit.
So I wanted to talk real quick about the Earth when they keep talking about Earth being a miscalculation.
Welcome to Earth.
Do you think that's when they talk about when the second episode when they were talking about what's her name's how O was all pissed off and was like, you fucked a bunch of shit up, and then now they talked about it again. Earth was a Rizzo. They're talking about Earth was a miscalculation, referencing that again. Is that just the whole synths coming down and killing Dodge, or was it something bigger than that?
No, there's one sense. Those are the Romulans.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's
Dodge,
what I meant. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Do you think that was that?
Yeah,
really referring directly
that's
to
all they're talking about.
It's
So
just that-
the whoever's controlling things wants to capture the synths.
Yeah.
Dodge and Soji in order to figure out where more of them are, to track them down.
I was just wondering if that miscalculation was referring to the same
That's
thing.
so basically they're implying that Rizzo was too aggressive and she sent a bunch of assassins after somebody and they assassinated her. So maybe Dodge is totally dead. I'm still not buying it. I still think that she will probably pop back up again at some point, possibly, especially if they're so programmed to protect themselves and Maddox or whoever's controlling them clearly is keeping eye on them because there's calling at the right time, being able to do commands. Anyway,
there was more sexual tension. I can smell her on you. The smell is remarkably carnal. That was like, good luck, brother. See that you don't fall in love.
Is that guy banging his sister?
They can't be brother and sister because they have to be banging.
Well, he keeps referring to her as sister.
Well, I think,
but maybe it's kind of like a joke thing or something. I don't know.
I think it's
maybe the fact that they're banging is a joke.
Maybe
that's how they joke around.
Maybe
it's like, I'm
it's just an old classic Romulan, the old Romulan incest gag. But did you notice she was wearing sort of a Sinjan style like outfit, like from Star Trek Nemesis? Not precisely, but with the high shoulder. When she got back to Romulan style, it's evocative of the Shinzan.
She looked a lot more Romulan than she did before. That's for sure.
And they had I really like that they're doing all sorts of Romulans things. So not only did they have the joke about the thick-headed Northerners, they're the ones that.
He looked like an Ophi Romulan. Now you never seen an Ophi looking Romulan.
He's a little
before.
Well, the thing is, you see them all the Romulans on TNG had the forehead ridges because the makeup guy decided why the hell not, and most everyone
TNG.
decided it was stupid because the Romulans didn't really need that because the Vulcans didn't have that and they're related to Vulcans, so it was sort of this needless thing. So this is a nice, fun little way to get it into the canon that the Northerners have the head ridges.
Yeah, that's
but
cool, yeah.
we commented last week how they have different haircuts and things, and in this one you saw there were some 2009 Eric Bana style Romulans. There's some like TNG style with the haircuts. There's people with more longer hair, more TOS style. So they're letting them do their own thing, which is, and again, like I said last week, it makes sense because their fascist empires.
There was the guy with
so.
the crazy like sort of punk stuff.
Yeah.
If they have enough discipline to commit suicide, he can have enough discipline not to say shit like, she's not what you think, or like, oh, you'll be sorry, things like that.
Well, I mean, that's propaganda. I mean, that's like fake news, Twitter, Russian bot stuff, sow discord, why not? Sow discord among your people. And speaking of that attack on the Chateau Picard, I really liked how that scene was shot and directed. It was so quiet. There was no music. It was just the sounds of like the effing and jeffing and the huffing and puffing and the occasional blaster.
It gave you a feeling like those Zhaban and Laris were like, this was just kind of, they switched to this mode now.
Yes.
It became second nature.
They switched over real quick.
Yeah.
They knew what was up.
I mean, I was expecting this to happen at some point. it happened this way. It happened in a way that I didn't exactly expect. But
Yeah.
you're expecting the Romulans to come to Picard's house and try to fuck shit up.
And it was awesome seeing him fuck him up. Is Romulan disruptors known to not have a stun setting before this?
Yeah, I think that's just, it's kind of like
It's like,
Klingons are the
maybe
same
it was
thing.
on stuff.
I think that's interesting. It says something about their culture, right? Like this
Yeah,
idea
they-
that there's no second chances.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like even if the total asshole wins,
Only humans have the stuns.
even if the total asshole wins, the one who lost, they were weak and therefore they're worse.
Not even the Vulcans have
even
the
if
stuns.
I bet Bolians have a trim setting
trims what?
because they're
Anyway, I was just saying.
Mott the barber.
I was just saying it. It's
Is
just,
that-
it's just,
okay.
it's just kind of an.
That's the alien from Mott the Barber.
It's the attitude of like, if you win, if you're stronger, that's all that matters. Like in Klingon, you beat the other person, you become the captain. It doesn't matter if you're a total asshole piece of shit. If you win, then that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and in Klingons, it tends to be
It's like-
aggressiveness and strength, whereas in Romulans, it tends to be sneaking around and political maneuvering is how you destroy people and gain power. But it's the same thing. They're both they like vying for power.
Call the weak. That's a magic card.
So okay,
Call the weak. Do you know what Do you know what that one does?
It's a black one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you mana for sacrificing your creatures. You call
Yeah.
them
That sounds about right.
and
And
use
it
the
can-
weak to make you strong.
and it can be any creature, right?
Yeah, it just says creature.
So you can do 1/1 creatures and get 1 mana for them.
yeah,
That's a pretty good card.
yeah.
So I was thinking about it. Soji clearly is under the control of some other factor, some person or whatever, some group, and has been put onto this Borg cube. I think we can assume her personality was created 3 years ago. She was placed on this Borg cube for some purpose. Whatever she's doing, presumably, is feeding into that purpose, which then leads to the question, what was Daj being positioned to do at Daystrom? Now, you can just make some assumptions that say, okay, well, she was going to maybe hook up with Dr. Girardi and maybe try to get the work going. But
They're both doing robot shit.
yeah. And Daj was real happy to get to the Daystrom Institute, but then we found out from Dr. Girardi that the research was kind of lame because they couldn't actually build anything because they were not permitted to do it, and there were limitations on their research. So it's sort of, in a way, not a cherry gig to have.
And
And neither is working on a Borg cube, for that matter, probably.
she had all the like the sort of like kicking ass ability,
Yeah, but that kicked in.
and it kicked in.
It kicked in when she was in
Soji-
danger.
Soji
just
probably
like
has that too.
Well, Soji's. I think one of you was implying it earlier when you said that Soji got that information in her head.
Right.
It
Right,
kicked
yeah.
in
Like-
when she needed it.
Like she has the intellectual ability, and the other one had like the kicking ass.
And
ability.
like you said before, they called her Seb Cheneb or whatever, the destroyer.
Yeah.
Seb Cheneb, the destroyer.
The end of all.
Does that mean anything backwards?
Benek Bess. No, that means nothing.
All right. So, any final thoughts on that before? Because I think one thing before we go, we should talk about the cursing thing, because I think it's a kind of funny thing to talk about, cursing in Star Trek, and there's been a bit of an online conversation about that. But anything else about this particular episode? The end was great when the TNG music kicked in. I know it borderline cheesy, but
I thought it was great.
I thought
it's
they'd
good.
said it. I thought that Girardi was all super excited. Rafi was rolling her eyes after Picard said engage, like Jesus. And then like the Next Generation music is all like it kicks in.
Yeah. No, that's what you're. It's all leading up to like that. Like these episodes were all leading up to that moment.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
and
he's got his team together and they're blasting off into space.
And it sort of makes sense if it's the internet's correct, and this was originally 2 episodes, effectively a 2-episode pilot where it goes from Picard being all blah 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 to being engaged and going on his adventure.
Because there's sort of like 3 kind of short episodes.
Yes.
They're not hour long episodes.
So I guess it was kind of neat that they had a tradition they got invented for the Romulans where they have a false front door. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I was- I-
That was cool.
I hope that leads to something interesting.
Yeah, and
Maybe in the code.
well, in the code. I mean, speaking of the code, I was like pausing and looking at that, and just because it's kind of like you could see there were words that were supposed to stand out.
Gorn egg.
So there was some kind of 5336 star GNDN or something, I don't know. But then it said crypto algorithm identification, Gorn egg. And it said type quantum fingerprinting, origin, free cloud. And I'm guessing free cloud is like, but then they have some dice rolling. So free cloud is some kind of law of the sea kind of free planet with gambling and I think it's all sorts of illegal activities, like the Wild West or some shit.
I don't know if you saw the preview, but I think
I don't usually watch.
It was like some kind of samurai shit.
I mean, you could talk about it. But.
I get the impression, because I mean it's not clear from the preview either. I get the impression that Free Cloud is probably one of the places where it's like a Romulan refugee settlement, where they set up shop after Romulus was destroyed.
But there was also some dice rolling, so I'm guessing there's things. There's probably gambling.
I think
stuff, like it was an ad for it.
And the Gorn egg is funny because it's an Easter egg.
Yeah.
And Gorn is, she's sitting at Vasquez Rocks where, the
Gorn
and they mentioned the Gorn hegemony before in the previous episode. It'd be kind of awesome if they come into play. I kind of hope in this series or another series, they should make it all Gorn centric. It should be like a whole political thing about the Gorn.
Because how much Gorn has there been really? There's only been that one episode.
Well, they talked about twice.
There's been twice.
Once on TOS and then, Jesus, when was the other one?
Seems like there was one other mention of the Gorn.
Was it Enterprise? God, I can't remember now.
I thought you just meant how many times have Gorn been mentioned in this show, and they've mentioned it in this show at least twice.
No, they've only been seen twice. They've been mentioned periodically. But anyway, the other one is the GNDN is an old TOS production crew joke where they put it on doors, and it means goes nowhere, does nothing.
Okay.
Kind of like Jeffries tubes.
Yeah.
That was because of, I think Matt Jeffries was the name of one of the production designers on TOS. They were just like these hallways that,
And I think all the computers just had a list of the cast, basically, was all the text on the computers and things like that. So I thought it was kind of funny how Picard just zips in. He's like, here you go. Have some up. She's like, I'm not doing anything. Oh, whatever. Here, take it. See you later.
That was funny. That was good.
Yeah.
Because that was that's a good old man Picard.
Yeah.
You'd expect him to do that kind of thing.
This is another part that code thing reminded me actually of Discovery 2, because they had something similar where Burnham was looking through code. And what's the name of the engineer guy, the bioengineer? Stamets, right. So yeah, there was a code thing there too where it was looking like some kind of codey code. This is the first time they really talk about code. I always wondered what O'Brien's doing in DS9, because he's talking about kind of indirectly talking about coding, but he's
just kind of kicking the machines and screaming at them.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I always wondered how, whenever I see these scenes with the cube, zooming in on the cube, the Borg cube, I guess it's all held together by force fields, right? But they really rely heavily that these force fields are going to hold up, because there's a bunch of holes in the thing. If those force fields gave away, they'd all give up to the vacuum of space.
I'm sure there's indoor force fields. Yeah, whatever you call them.
There's the Borg cubes are just very full of holes.
Full of holes.
Anyway, so I didn't know if there was anything else that I wanted to.
I thought it was really exciting and continued and expanding the mystery. And I think we're going to meet more characters that will join up with this little RPG party next week. And I don't know. I'm looking forward to see where it goes.
Yeah,
the episode had a feel where it kept jumping around, and it was like a crime drama kind of a show where you had these little scenes, and it was quick sort of, here, this is what's happening over here, and then this was happening over here.
I thought it was nicely paced,
but it was still cool. It was part of the excitement. You got to see. It was it gave you the feeling that sort of everything was kind of happening all at once.
Yeah, and that there was pressure. You gotta keep things moving.
Right.
Yeah. I like the motion of it. I like sort of this. I know whether it's standard stuff or not. I just like that feeling of oh, now they're all together on the ship. Like you said, even though it's maybe seemed too gamey or whatever.
Nah,
I liked it. I thought it just made me feel good when I saw that.
That's what you're waiting for.
I didn't know I was waiting for it to be implemented exactly like that. I didn't know I was waiting for that.
Right.
To some extent, some part of it I was, but then when it happened, I was like, whoa, that's exactly sort of what should happen. And I don't care if it's campy or predictable. I thought it was just really awesome, and it made me really excited about oh my gosh, what's going to happen, So, and I mean, sure, you could probably predict a lot of things that may or may not happen, but maybe you can't. I don't know, but it's just a fun ride or whatever.
All right, so very briefly, I think it's an interesting thing to bring up because it's being discussed in the fandom. Is the issue of quote unquote swear words on Captain Picard now, and actually in modern Trek in general.
It began with Discovery. Well, it began with Generations.
It began. My argument is it began with TOS in the 60s, because at the end of City on the Edge of Forever, I forget who. I think it's Bones or somebody says like, Jim, let's get the hell out of here. And they received so many fucking complaints. NBC got a million complaints. Not a million, obviously, but they got a ton. Like a lot of people complain and say you can't have this terrible language on the television.
You can watch the news and see people fucking dying in Vietnam.
And they said damn it all the time, which at that time would have been considered quite rude. And apparently one reason they were able to do it was because I think a damn it accidentally got through on Gunsmoke or something. And they just nobody wanted to bother with it. And nobody, but that sort of set the precedent. And then other shows started doing it.
The damn it was all right.
I'm kind of reminded of when I was reading a book about the Far Side, and Gary Larson was saying he had a comic. It was Tarzan crossing his legs because he had to go to. He was on a vine swinging, he crossing his legs because he had to pee. And so there was an outhouse in another tree, but they originally had to take that outhouse out because that was considered super fucking like you can't have that. But so yes, to your point of like
Rob and Laura Petrie had separate beds.
Yeah.
So did Ricky and Lucy, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
There was a bunch of separate bed shit,
so,
especially in the 50s.
Actually, maybe Rob and Laura Petrie were the first ones who didn't. They might have been the first ones who actually got to share a bed. I don't remember.
So it's to that point, like you're saying, damn it back then is.
And in Star Trek 4, double dumbass on you.
Yeah, double dumbass on you.
In Generations, of course, but
I forgot about that. It's so funny.
That's fantastic.
That's the best part. The nuclear vessels.
And they say son of a bitch. Son of a bitch was I understand people not wanting, Star Trek to become, Data talking about getting butt fucked all the time or something. I understand that, right? I get it. But it's not that.
Lieutenant Barclay.
Because the Admiral, when she says the fucking hubris, it's 100% in character and basically appropriate for that particular scene.
Yeah, it had the effect of I was like, whoa, she's pissed.
And when Rafi says that's bullshit, it's yes. That would be what a normal person would say.
And she said feckin' cheeky monkeys.
Yeah, and those fecking cheeky bastards or whatever.
Yeah. Cheeky monkey. That's from Cheeky Monkey. That's from that SNL skit with Mike Myers, who's
Cheeky Monkey.
It's like Simon.
My name is Simon, which is based on a cartoon that I used to watch on Pinwheel.
Yeah,
it's a British
Pinwheel.
Totally.
Yep.
But it is,
second-rate Sesame Street.
I don't discount people who don't like it. And I understand it is a little bit different. It's been modernized. It's different. That's absolutely true that they are being a little bit more free. Discovery did some stuff too. Which I personally
but you could say like the fight scenes are modernized too. Like the fight scenes aren't that classic. Oh, the classic clasp my hands together and bash them with my arms, which is supposed to be
people beating the shit out of each other, violently.
There's a lot of sort of like classic stage combat stuff happening in Star Trek.
In the older Star Trek, the movie, it's the double axe handle in wrestling where they put the clasp of two hands and hit it, which takes away all your force in a punch. Your punch happens from your wrist.
It also breaks all your fingers.
Yeah, it breaks your fingers. It takes away the power of your hips. It just doesn't do anything. And so, but now they have the modern choreography of like cool suplexes and like crazy kicks. So,
and people getting shot and being all like, and like vaporizing. Yeah, that horrible,
that awesome goo.
But again, even that's not new. Even TOS and TNG had some pretty gruesome moments. I think that if you're not into it, I understand. And I've heard a lot of people put it this way. They've said, I've always thought of Star Trek I can come home and watch with my kids. And now I can't. And the thing is, I respect that. If that's how you want to raise your kids, that is totally your business. But your kids already know those words.
Yeah.
First of all, they know those words.
They've already heard you say them.
They've heard you say them. First of all, they know those words from school or wherever.
My parents cussed a whole lot,
so they know those words, and they're just words. The kids are better off when they learn them in context and and all that. But you can watch. I can watch this show with my kids. I don't care if my kids and they're.
You watch Game of Thrones with your kids.
Yeah, well, Tessa likes the game. She likes watching people get stabbed in the face.
Yeah.
I'm hoping
all right.
I'm hoping she becomes a surgeon. we're gonna push her in that direction because the alternatives aren't great. But the point being is it's a totally valid concern and all that, and it's unfortunate if it's affecting your enjoyment of the show. But I personally am enjoying the fact that they are maturing the show a little bit, modernizing the show, because it does, after a certain amount of time, it does get sort of ridiculous when people are in life and death situations. And they're all like, "Gall darn it! Oh, this is jeepers sneeps. This is too bad."
In Discovery, they were having a party and they were listening to like music from like our time or something. You know,
Yeah.
It was you know,
And dancing around.
yeah, it was like some sort of hip hop kind of music.
I mean,
I forget what it was.
I know what you're
but
talking about. I can't
it
remember.
was you know, it was cool. It was like, this is an updated Star Trek. Like,
Well, do people really? So are the same? Do people really? Are there people that are like legitimately pissed about this, or are they just kind of whining?
I
about
think
it?
no. Well, I think there's a spectrum.
is it like the people that are whining about Star Wars?
There are some people that when
Star
you hear
Wars. What part? Star Wars. Oh, the new Star Wars.
just everything. Yeah.
Everything, anything.
There are some
everything.
people who are really, really upset about it, and they really find it offensive. And again, I totally respect that viewpoint, and that's totally cool. My response would be that there's also another segment. I'm guessing the larger segment of the fandom that is quite okay with that change.
They just don't like it's not traditional.
And
Star
it's not
Trek.
like it's a significant change. And every new version of Star Trek is going to be pilloried by some segment of the fans, because you are used to it. And the thing is the very nature of Star Trek, and I'm sure this applies to a certain degree with the Star Wars people, is that for a lot of people, that's that comfortable place. It's that place you go because you want to feel better about having a bad day at work or whatever.
It's like when you were young, you watched this Star Trek.
And there's an attachment to that, and that's understandable. And that's fine. And you can go watch that on Netflix. I do that all the time. If I'm in a TNG mood, I'm going to watch TNG. I'm not going to watch Discovery. If I'm in a DS9 mood, I'm going to do that. Probably not going to watch that much Voyager, but like I might watch some Enterprise.
Yeah.
You know? It depends on what vibe I'm going for. So I appreciate that. But what's great about this is now we're getting new vibes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, if you had a problem with the cursing, I would think is if it didn't like ultimately offend you because of the language, it was just because it's not old Star Trek, then you'd have a problem with like all it's smoking, for example.
Sure.
There was never smoking. That was gone in the future. You'd have problems with the fact that Picard is sort of this everyone's flawed, but Picard is really showing that he's not weak, but he's human, and that he falls into the same human traps that we do, which wasn't displayed so much in TNG.
Yeah. And partly because of the context, because in TNG, first of all, the flagship of the Federation, the best of the best, one would presume that they are overall better behaved and more quote unquote advanced. Not everyone. That's like when the people were upset with that short trek, The Trouble with Edward, where a lot of people were saying like that guy Edward would never be allowed in Starfleet. And it's like, well, why are you saying that? There's plenty of
there's that TOS episode with that Charlie guy, and he's all fucked up.
There's a bunch. I mean, it happens repeatedly. That the assumption that everyone in Starfleet is this paragon of virtue is a problematic thing. I never took it that way, and when I understood that people were taking it that way, I found it very interesting and troubling, because I don't know. It's something to hope for, but it's not. It's a television show. There's got to be drama. And so people can't be perfect.
It's about humans.
But with Picard in particular, on the Enterprise, in most of the time we were seeing him not only Patrick Stewart playing the role of Picard, but Picard playing the role as the captain. And we saw that frequently with Picard, that when he was taken out of that element, he did behave a little bit differently, depending on the context, because when he was standing on the bridge, he stood differently. He took on he was like, I'm the captain and I'm going to give orders. I'm talking on the view screen, that kind of thing.
And that's a good point, because when he was on the Earth, he wasn't the captain, you know.
Yeah,
he wasn't.
Not the
he was
captain.
Assuming he could do captain things. He could just pick up and jump right back into it. But for example, he couldn't jump back into getting a ship, and with Raffi, she wouldn't jump back into like helping him.
Right.
So he's not the captain.
He wasn't keeping up with her. Like, he went off into this weird world where he's in France at this place where he's miserable, and he's not thinking like he normally thinks.
So that's the thing. So not only is he not treated like a captain, but in some ways he's not quite acting like
he's
one.
not acting like himself, because he's not in Starfleet anymore.
Right. So that's when he's on the bridge, you know, he does, it's like, had to do it, engage, and it's great. It felt like really awesome, but it just feels it's just something clicks when that happens, and it just feels cool. But
these 3 episodes have been him working towards re-inhabiting that role, which of course he can never truly re-inhabit because he's not going to be the captain of a big starship again, presumably. I mean, that's not his situation. He's not the captain of this ship. Captain Rios is the captain of this ship with his squad of hologram friends.
Right, yeah. They're just going to have fun with that.
But again, I think it's totally cool for people who are not into it. I understand that. And I would advocate, it looks like we're going to get a ton of Star Trek series now, right? So I would advocate the producer. I hope that the producers are planning this. I assume they're planning this, that they're building out all these shows, that a key thing has to be that these shows have to be differentiated from each other, right? Because the problem that we had in the 90s and early 2000s was people said there was too much Star Trek. I don't think it was that it was too much Star Trek. It was that you had Voyager, and Deep Space Nine was great. Everyone, even though people are coming to it late in some cases, it did its own very different thing in the Star Trek universe.
It introduced a new vibe.
And it benefited from that. But Voyager and Enterprise, which both have really good qualities and are shows worth watching, they nevertheless were aiming in some sense to mimic the TNG vibe. They were trying to keep those good times going with a new set of people.
And to make it more accessible to people.
Well, and Voyager, I would say, is more so because Enterprise, the thing that Enterprise had going for it, I mean, it was a good show. Scott Bakula, number one. That was really held the show together well. But
Trip Tucker's blue underwear.
Yeah, his blue boner. No, it was the way they shot it, like the production of it really sort of gave you a different,
fresher view
of it, right? But like you said, ultimately when it came to the source material, it was
a crew on a ship flying around called Enterprise.
Yeah,
and the thing is that I think that's where the fatigue came from. The fatigue came from the similar structure and style of the stories, and in my
Voyager
view,
was just fucking pointless.
Well, and
I mean, there were good episodes, maybe a handful, maybe, but
where both Voyager and Enterprise did excel was when they did something that was very different than had come before. So there are episodes of Voyager, especially when 7 of 9 comes on board, and then they start doing some more stuff with the Doctor. They have the opportunity. They, in my opinion, did not do it enough, but they start doing things that you could not have seen on TNG. It really was kind of its own new thing, and I think what they need to do with these series is differentiate them. And the signs are positive so far because we have Discovery, which is its own deal. Love it or hate it, it's its own deal, and it's very successful. And that's a flavor of action, fast-paced Star Trek for a certain segment of people. Now with Picard, I think most people have had their fears laid to rest that Picard was going to be a Discovery rehash because it's clearly a very different tone, very different style.
There are certain aspects that
the style is completely different.
There are certain aspects though that do. I mean, the style is different, but then there's like the shots that maybe aren't as crazy as Discovery.
It's similar people in the production, right?
Yeah, and then there's similar bits here and there, like the code thing I mentioned earlier.
They're
like,
structuring.
You could tell it was similarly influenced.
They're structuring the story differently. They're structuring the arc differently. The episodes are structured a little differently.
Yeah.
But it's got its own flavor to it. Now,
definitely.
Now, and then with the short treks, at first, the first few short treks were, I like them all, but the first few short treks were, okay, this is just filmed on the Discovery set or whatever, and it's just directly related to Discovery. But then they started going off and doing this bizarre, crazy stories.
Well, there's that one short trek that relates to the Picard stuff, the one about the girls on Mars.
Yeah, that's the most recent one, right? But the thing is they've really been like, that one is just like, it's just playing some Phil Collins or whatever, and showing some two little girls beating the shit out of each other.
That's a David Bowie song.
It is a David Bowie song, but I think it's the Phil Collins version.
Really?
I believe so. I could have that wrong, but I believe that's the case.
I mean, if it was somebody else.
Yeah, we can play it for you after this podcast, Dan. It's short. It's like super short.
I didn't realize that was Phil Collins. That's kind of
I think it's Phil Collins. It's not David Bowie. I know that. But anyway, the point being is they're doing then they have the animated ones, and then they had, the point being they allowed people to go in crazy directions. So now we know we have a Section 31 show coming out. So what's that going to be like? We know we have a Lower Decks, which is by one of the head writers of Rick and Morty, which is going to be an adult-oriented cartoon. So that's definitely going to have its own flavor, right? And then they have the Nickelodeon cartoon coming out, which is going to be targeted towards kids. And now the rumors today are that they've pretty much greenlit a Captain Pike series and apparently possibly a Starfleet Academy series, right?
This guy should have his own show.
I like Mandalorian, but a lot of people point out, and this is true, Star Trek really thrives as a television show. And so they can really go, they can take it, like Mandalorian's good. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying all the spin-offs of Star Wars haven't necessarily been
I think
successful,
Mandalorian,
but Star Trek has that more potential.
Right, that's the first Star Wars. Well, it's not the first Star Wars TV show, but it's the first.
I think Mandalorian worked really well because some of the episodes were basically like Star Trek episodes. I mean, it was sort of a Star Trek style, like walks into a village and helps some people and then goes away kind of thing. But I think it's a good point. So with the Pike show, maybe they can make that a little bit more episodic. That would make sense and people are asking for that. People want something a little bit more.
That is a good idea. Just have that show to sort of fill that sort of.
Or the Lower Decks, I'm sure will be probably more. The Lower Decks is clearly not going to be. It's going to be a comedy. It's going to be, if it has any sort of overarching season-long arc or something, it's not going to be as hardcore. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more episodic. So I think there are going to be.
Who are you laughing about over there?
It's going to be like funny. So
you're thinking about it.
Any sort of like story arc is going to be just something that's goofy and absurd.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
the flavors are going to be there. If this flavor doesn't work for you, then I hope the next flavor it will work for you, because I think that's that awesome potential for this era in Star Trek is that we have a bunch of different crazy Star Trek and everyone can discuss and fight over it, which one's the better one and which one sucks or whatever. But we didn't have that option a couple years ago.
Yeah, just don't put Picard on a pedestal and you'll be good, because you have a lot of different things that we
don't put Picard on the chain wax.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay, because like I know this dude that I work with, and I think he heard about the Picard series and he built up something in his mind,
right?
And now he's like, well, I don't know. So he built it all up. So he's disappointed already. He's like, well, this wasn't what I expected.
I mean, of course,
they're cussing. I don't know what to. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I mean,
that's right. I mean,
that's inevitable. I understand. Maybe you can't help but build one can't help but build thoughts in one's head of what to expect. But at the same time, of course, that's like going to lead you down.
Exactly. You're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
If you want to watch,
just be accepted for what it is.
If you want new episodes of TNG, then you watch the Orville.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great show, and it's there. So watch that, and then you get the old TNG vibes updated a bit. But Picard is doing its own thing, and so far, so good, I think.
Yeah.
So far, so G.
I like it.
All right, so let's leave it there.
So far, so G. That was a joke. It was a free joke.
What was the free joke?
So far, so G. Soji?
Oh, because the character's name is Soji?
Dodge, you understand me?
Nah.
It's really upsetting.
You're supposed to save this for when people give us
Nobody's going to know, but there's no reviews are coming.
Can you think Saurus? What was that line from Jurassic Park? Can you see it? Do you think he saw us?
Do you think he saw us?
Yeah.
God,
so if there's if there's a hologram of you or if there's a clone of you,
masturbation.
What's the possibility that you're going to have sex with this clone?
100%.
Yeah, right.
I think it has to happen.
I mean,
it just matter.
I'm not going to give any guarantees, but it's probably going to happen.
Right.
It's like in Back to the Future 2, where Doc Brown says, "Whatever you do, don't meet yourself."
Yeah.
Because it could erase the universe.
He was really saying.
No. I'm just using it by way of analogy because that's not real. Star Trek is real. Back to the Future 2 is a movie. By way of analogy of that, I think this is the reverse, if you have a clone or hologram of yourself and you don't have sex with it,
that's where the
universe will tear apart.
Explodes. Yeah.
I thought he was trying to keep him away because he was like, really what he was thinking is once you meet yourself in the future, you're going to fuck him.
That's you know what?
But you're saying that's what you're supposed to do.
Mind cannon. I know people call it head cannon, but I'm going to call it mind cannon.
You do
because
that.
head cannon makes me think somebody's pointing a fucking cannon at my
hand
brain.
cannon at your head.
That sucks.
Hand cannon.
Okay, so that was episode 11. It's got Star Trek.
The Jean-Luc Picard mysteries.
JL.
Dixon Hill Adventures.
JLP.
So that was an excellent episode. The end is the beginning. And
it was an excellent podcast.
Well, the end was the beginning because the end of that episode was like the beginning of the rest of the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Metaphor. So
thanks for listening, Victor Mendoza.
Victor Mendoza, shout out to you. Tarek, shout out to you.
Tarek, yes.
Then
Tarek.
Feedback at itsgotstartrek.com to send your electronic letters at It's Got Star Trek on any form of social media that matters these days. Except we're not on TikTok because that seems like it's some sort of Chinese scam. I don't know enough about it.
I don't know how you do that like how you advertise on TikTok.
I don't know.
I don't know how those kids use that thing. The kids do weird things.
If you kids are out there, kids shouldn't be listening to this show because it's labeled not safe for work.
Fuck.
It's labeled explicit.
But kids don't have work,
iTunes.
so it's okay.
Shit.
That's a good point. So you shouldn't be listening. But kids, if you are listening, could you explain to us how TikTok works? And if we should be on it, and I'll put Dan in charge of that.
Maybe you give us some insight on vaginas, too.
Dan, so there's that. It's got Star Trek on social media. It's got Star Trek. And those are the website. I don't need to tell you this. You fucking know this already. So
it's got it.
It's pretty fucking obvious.
It's in there.
We thought of a clever name that let us get all these things no problem. So it's got Star Trek everywhere you can find it. Write reviews for us because that's what the podcast manual says. I keep getting scolded by podcast people, and they say you're not saying it enough to write reviews. So write reviews or whatever.
Like, subscribe, and like.
Yeah, subscribe and like, and click the.
If you don't listen to podcasts, they're just going to die out.
Oh, you can listen to our podcast on YouTube too, by the way, which is weird because
you can watch it.
People do that.
You can do it on YouTube too.
I find myself doing it, so I put it up on YouTube because I catch Comedy Bang Bang clips and other stuff all the time on YouTube.
Bang Bang.
Put it on the TV in the living room while I'm sweeping up. I'm cleaning the floor.
Hot saucerman.
Yeah, listening to some stuff.
When you're not talking on the phone.
Papadons are bread, Dan.
What?
Papadons are bread.
Papadoms
are bread.
Papadoms.
Papadons.
It's sort of a wafer.
Or bread.
What
would your preference be? Papadoms or bread?
Or bread.
Is that like the Jesus bread you get in communion?
No, papadom. It's like
at an Indian restaurant.
It's like an Indian
like
tortilla
crispy.
Oh, that stuff has a weird kind of spice flavor.
Well, they come in different. There's different ones. Different restaurants will do different ones.
Yeah,
it's like a crispy tortilla thing.
Usually a bunch of black pepper in there
and some sort of dipping sauce.
Yeah, that or bread.
Yeah, that's your choice.
I've had enough bread in my life. I mean, not that I'll not have any more bread, but right now I'm feeling Papadom then.
Papadoms. Okay. All right. So Dan says Papadoms. Papadoms. And It's Got Star Trek internet podcast.
What was that?
That was Jesse making some noises.
Okay, we could do this for like 20 minutes.
All right. So the synths have come out. Literally, the synths have come out. Dan and Jesse have just removed synths.
Good
from
morning,
their pockets.
plastic people.
And
hell yeah.
This is about to go in a dangerous direction, so we'll have to say
hell yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Hell yeah.
Can we go already?
Yes, fine. Engage.